Morning, everyone. I'm Bill Lougheed, Executive Director of the Georgian Bay Land Trust, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you here to our second LandMark Speaker Series for 2020. We're delighted today to have eminent researcher Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser with us. But before we get to that, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today and each one of you for your great support of GBLT's conservation work on Georgian Bay. Now, although these are challenging times, I'm inclined to look at the silver lining at these times. And this pandemic, for me, has reminded me of the importance of family, of community, of relationships, and of the outdoors. It has shone a spotlight on where our food comes from and the importance of nature in supplying that. In these uncertain times, wild places like Georgian Bay remain unaffected. It's a place we can always go to as long as we look after it. I also wish at this time to thank Mark Payne and Payne Marine for sponsoring this series. Without his support, this would not happen. Payne's Marine in Point of Barrel has been serving that community since 1961 and is a supplier of Yamaha outboards and Scott Hunt and limestone boats. I hope you all visit him at paynemarine.com. Eastern Georgian Bay shorelines and interior are home to the richest diversity of reptiles in all of our country. This is due in part to the longest freshwater land interface in the world. It is home to, Eastern Georgian Bay is home to 6 of Ontario's at-risk species, and more work is needed to determine the population viabilities of our turtles and to protect them, and GBLT is part of that work. On that note, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser, McMaster University. Pat's been doing wetland assessment work since 2003 on our coast, and it's her baseline work on assessment work on wetlands and inland wetlands, including vernal pools, for planning to move forward with the preservation of turtles on our coast and other reptiles as well. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce to all of you Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser and her talk about country turtles. Over to you, Pat.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share screen. I can still see the poll right in front of me. I wonder if somebody could unshare the results.
Pat, I think it's unshared. You can just, is there an X you can click to close it?
Stop sharing. Well, I can't. It's right in the middle of my screen.
Can you drag it off?
No, it's like it's really stuck.
Okay.
Oh, here it is. Okay, I got it. So thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm really happy to be able to share with you one of the best parts of my job, which is to respond on things like the turtles, and especially the species at risk that I'm going to talk about today. Before I start talking, I would like to acknowledge that none of the work that I'm going to talk about would happen without the talents of the graduate students, the research staff, and undergraduate thesis students that I've had the honor of supervising over the past probably about 10 years or so since we've been working on turtles. And I'm going to highlight a couple of the students' work in this talk. So I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about the turtle origin and evolution. Maybe some of you are already familiar with this, but maybe not everyone. So 3.5 billion years ago, the life, as we know it, the first form appeared. And then about 500 million years ago, invertebrates were very common. Then 320 million years ago, reptiles evolved from amphibians. And it's around 220 million years ago that we have the ancestral turtles. And this actually predates the extinction of dinosaurs by quite a number of years. And the turtles are the oldest and the most primitive living reptile, which have essentially maintained its anatomy and ecology within the last 200 million years. So one of the major things that we have to recognize is that they were one of the first to adapt to living on land. And this is long before mammals evolved. So living on land, they had to develop lungs to breathe the air. They had to grow scaly skin so that they could retain the moisture. The males, instead of just releasing sperms into the water, they had to start to copulate with the female. So that means that they had to develop specialized organs. And then the eggs themselves had to have a special layer over it, the shells that can help them withstand desiccation when they are being laid inside the sand and gravel to protect them. And then because of that, the females have to evolve claws to dig into the soil and the sand. Now, all of the turtles that we have belong to the order Testudines, which include the terrestrial, marine, and freshwater environments. They all have a bony shell. The upper part of it is called the carapace, and then the bottom part is called the front. The ribs are fused to the inside of this carapace, the top part. And most modern turtles have no teeth. They only have a keratinized beak, which can be very sharp, like the ones in snapping turtles. The anatomy of freshwater turtles, as opposed to the sea turtles, the shell morphology has really remained unchanged for millions of years. Some of these species have a hinge on them, which is on the plastron. And this allows them to close up almost completely so that it encloses both the head and the limbs, and so nothing can really attack it. There is also something called sexual dimorphism, which means that there is a differentiation between the males and the females, and the size is the major differentiation. The males tend to be a lot larger, or relatively larger. They also have a concavity to the plastron, and this is to facilitate coupling with the females when they're on top of it during mating. The turtles can mate multiple times during a season. The females, though, can store the sperm from multiple males, and in fact, some females can lay their eggs, their fertile eggs, 4 years after if adverse conditions exist. Now, the females have to find suitable nesting habitat, and this is actually quite a big feat. For some species, they can just go above the water, the wetland they live in. But others, like the blandings, have to travel long distances to suitable nesting sites. And the females also have to dig these nests. Now, they use their hind legs primarily, and these legs are damaged, then they're essentially infertile. The female lay their eggs and then they leave. There's no parental care. There's no such thing as nest guarding. So there is very high egg depredation. Lots of things can depredate the nest and eat the eggs. And as well, when the hatchlings come out, they can also die very easily from predation. Now, I think most of you know that turtles are cold-blooded. That means that they don't have any internal mechanism to control their body temperature. So when it's cold out, so in early spring, the turtles have to bask on the rocks or logs. And in this way, they can raise their body temperature. And in the same way, and when it's very hot outside, they have to cool themselves. And so they submerge in water. They will also use wetlands for protection. For instance, when they're traveling to their nest sites. And in the wintertime, they have to escape freezing. If they stay out in the air, they will the temperatures in the north will go below zero, and that would kill them. So they stay under the water, but near the sediment. And so they don't actually hibernate in the same sense as some animals that would undergo reduced metabolism for the entire winter. Blanding's turtles are known to poke their heads out of icy waters to investigate, especially while we're doing some monitoring. The sperms in the males will mature during the winter, and then the males will respond very quickly as soon as the weather warms up, and they start mating. And this may be one of the reasons why they overwinter in groups. The adult turtles have very few natural predators, especially if they can enclose themselves completely, like these blandings. Their natural predators could include some birds. I have seen birds pick up turtles, for instance, and drop them to crack them open so they can eat them. They have very long lifespans. Box turtles can live for more than 100 years. Blandings are known to live for at least 80 years. They also have very late sexual maturity. So that means that they're not going to be mature as a female and a male until they're 15 to 20 years of age. And then on top of that, they have what is called low fecundity, which means the number of eggs that they produce in their lifetime is very low. For one thing, they reproduce once in the season, and they have very small clutches. Spotted turtles, for instance, can lay as few as 3 eggs in a nest in South Carolina. So, and then on top of that, eggs take up to 4 months to hatch. So it seems like there are great odds that the high egg and hatchling mortality, the low clutch size, delayed maturity, loss of nesting habitat, these are all great odds against the turtle surviving to maturity to successfully reproduce. So it's easy to see why the death of any reproductive female can lead to local extinction, or we call it extirpation, in very small isolated populations. Almost all the turtle species in North America are imperiled. So they are listed as being at risk of extinction. And recovery plans must be implemented if they are to survive. The two major threats are loss or degradation of critical habitat, which are the nesting and the overwintering habitat. And then the second one is road mortality. If their habitat is located adjacent to roads, then they have great probability of being injured or killed from collisions with cars. Now, the turtles in Ontario, there are 8 native species. The red ear slider that you can see in nature, they're introduced from a pet trade, and they come from the southern US. There are 2 provincially listed endangered species, which means that they face imminent extirpation or extinction. These are the wood and spotted turtles. The Blanding's turtle is a threatened species, along with the spiny softshell. They're likely to become endangered if they're not protected. And then there are these special concern. They are listed because they may become threatened or endangered. So that means that information is fed to the committee that determines this, that they are perhaps becoming reduced in numbers. So as yet, the Committee on the Status of Species at Risk in Ontario has not assessed the status of the Midland painted turtle, but the painted turtle within Canada has already been assessed as being of special concern. So within Ontario, there are 7 of 8 native species that are listed at risk. Within Canada, all 8 are listed. Those that are living in Georgian Bay, we're very fortunate that we actually have the wood turtle, the spotted turtle, the Blanding's turtle, the snapping, musk, and the map turtles, as well as the painted. The threats that are in Georgian Bay include a number of things. For instance, in most areas that are settled and have roads, we're going to have road mortality. But this is primarily within the southeastern portion of Georgian Bay. The boat injuries can occur on any of the habitats where boats are traveling. So any of the turtle habitat around boat channels or marinas. There is also fragmentation or loss of nesting habitat. And this is especially a problem for species with high site fidelity, such as the blandings. They will go back to the same habitat for nesting year after year after year, even after the habitat has been degraded, or even if they have been destroyed. The loss of movement corridors is another really important threat. They use vernal pools and streams, and if they get dried up or if they are destroyed through development, then that represents a major threat to their population. And then finally, there are different threats to their nest survivorship. The mammals like bears or pets, once they hatch, then there are mesopredators like raccoons and skunks, as well as domesticated pets and fish and birds that can eat them. Road mortality in more populated areas in southeastern Georgian Bay, as I mentioned, is a problem. But really, the major problem of road mortality has been felt in southwestern Ontario. And I'm going to give you a very short summary of how road mortality has caused the decline of one specific population near McMaster. Now, it's been said that no point in southwestern Ontario is more than 1.5 kilometers away from a road. This work is part of Morgan Pitsack, which is a master's student in my lab in between 2016 and 2018. We worked on the Cootes Paradise Marsh, which is located at the western end of Lake Ontario. And the turtles that live in Cootes Paradise, especially on the western end, have a high probability of being injured or killed by roads. Now here's a map that I'll show you. This is the aerial photo of Cootes Paradise Marsh in the 1930s. And you'll see that most of the land around it is either used as agricultural or forested. There's really no really much of a hint of Hamilton at that point. And during that time, the marsh was regionally known for high biodiversity. But then high water levels of Lake Ontario and discharge of sewage from Dundas over 6 to 7 decades have degraded the marsh. And by the 1960s, we had started to see a decline in the marsh. But even as recently as the 1980s, the largest recorded snapping turtle population in Western Lake Ontario existed in Cootes Paradise. You'll see here, this is an aerial photo of Cootes Paradise in the year 2015. This road actually was built in 1936, so just a couple of years after this photo was taken. And this road network, which includes Cootes Drive and Olympic Drive, led to very high adult mortality. And the human development and high water levels have destroyed about half of the nesting habitat. So the major cause of population decline has been attributed to the injuries from vehicular collisions on Cootes Drive. Now, in 2009, a group of volunteers formed the Dundas Turtle Watch, and they systematically patrolled Cootes Drive to monitor road mortality of all wildlife, including turtles. We used their data to determine the mortality rate and showed that the decline from over 1,000 in the 1980s down to fewer now than 100 in 2002. And almost all of this can be explained just by road mortality alone. And when we conducted the population viability analysis, it indicated that if no mitigation, if we don't stop this road mortality, then in 150 to 200 years, the entire population will become extirpated. So this is a very rapid decline in the turtle population, one of the highest numbers in Western Ontario in the 1900s to extirpation by 2100. There, within Georgian Bay, the loss or fragmentation of nesting habitat, especially for blandings, is something that we've been studying. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that and the loss of movement corridors. So our approach is to take a landscape level assessment of habitat, take an inventory of this, and then protect these critical areas from development. So this means that we have the determined habitats used by target species like the blandings. And we can do this using a habitat suitability model, or we can use species occupancy models. And I'm also going to be telling you a little bit about some research we're starting, which is using eDNA techniques. So why habitat suitability model, or HSM? Well, we have a very large study area, the entire eastern and northern shoreline of Georgian Bay. Most of it is not accessible by road. So if you were to do a survey, the conventional survey, it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to take a lot of time and work with very trained people. So what an HSM does is it uses detailed information from one or two sites, and then it builds a statistical model of the suitable habitat that can be applied to the entire area. Now, of course, once you have this model, you need to have an independent data set to validate it and determine how accurate it is. So the habitat suitability model for the blandings turtle was the work done by Dr. Chantal Marco, one of my PhD students from 2013 to 2018. And in the beginning of her degree, she started an 18-month intensive radio telemetry and GPS logger study. So here is a radio transmitter, and this is a GPS logger that we put on 12 turtles. And we wanted to put this on a protected island so that it would be natural. And these turtles were monitored, and every location that we found it was put into a model, was put into a data set. And we also then noted what kind of habitat was associated with these locations. And all of this information was used to build the HSM. And in this case, it was the Beausoleil Island. And then it was applied to the entire archipelago. And we had data from 5 other sites that we used to validate and determine accuracy. Besides determining this or building this HSM for inventory purposes, our research was also incorporated into the 2016 recovery strategy for this particular population. Now, the habitat classes that were most important in the HSM included things like the rock barren or moss or lichen, wetlands like bogs and fens, wet meadows, as well as vernal pools. The best model estimated that about 64% of all the islands of the Georgian Bay archipelago have suitable habitat. And this represents 89% of the total area that we mapped. So the islands are ranked according to high probability of being suitable versus to very low, which is that green color. And because the blandings turtle is semi-aquatic and they migrate, the vernal pools and bogs and fens are disproportionately important, both as travel corridors to the nesting sites or for overwintering. Now, it's important to note that even though we have assessed these as being suitable, we have never done a study to show that all of these islands are being used by turtles, this is the work that must be followed up by field surveys. It may be that some of these islands are located too far from the mainlands for turtles to swim there to colonize. Now, this is a video that we took that Chantal and an assistant, after following this turtle for more than 8 hours during a day, she finally settled down and started to nest. Unlike the southern populations in say Lake Erie, the turtles, the Blandings turtles, don't nest in sandy areas, and there are no agricultural fields or dirt roads. The Georgian Bay turtles on islands have to search out these rocky outcrops with pockets of lichen and moss and loose soil that have gotten trapped. You can see here in this video that the little radio transmitter of one of our turtles. And now it would be nice to think that this nest survived and actually allowed us to get extra hatchlings, but we had a camera trap on this nest, and in fact we saw a bear dig up one of these or dig up the nest and started to eat the eggs. So unfortunately this was a failed nest. We can also develop something called the species occupancy model to determine what habitats are suitable for other species that you don't have a lot of information on. So this example is the musk turtle that comes from the work of Chantal and another master student, Julia Rutledge. Normally, we trap turtles using hoop nets, as shown here. We bait them with sardines. And this is a picture of fyke nets that we use for fish surveys. So you can see that they're very, very similar. And in fact, if there's fish inside here, then they could serve the bait as bait for the turtles. And so very often when we surveyed, in my other work, when we survey fish communities in coastal wetlands, we very often get these bycatch of turtles. So the Chantal and Julia took 58 of these sites that had bycatch of the turtles, and they developed an occupancy model, which is another statistical model. Now the sites had been sampled up to 4 times over a 13-year period. And that translated to about 70% probability of catching them if they actually reside. And then we asked the question, what do occupied wetlands have characteristics that are statistically different from the unoccupied sites? And the variables that we look at are landscape level variables that you can do without a lot of field work. So we look at things like the dock density, the road density, the building density, the percent of forest or wetlands around the buffer, the slope of the shoreline, and then the wetland area itself. Now, this approach can be developed into occupancy models for other species, and that's really the primary contribution. It's not so much just showing what the musk turtle's occupancy is. The most important variables turns out to be the number of buildings. So the number of buildings and docks and roads within 1 kilometer of a site determines the probability of musk turtles occupying. And wetlands with at least 70% forest cover within a 250-meter buffer had much higher likelihood of it being occupied. And this could be because of the lower nutrients that comes in the runoff if it's a well-forested area. And wetlands with a more variable bathymetry, so with a slope of between 3 to 7 degrees, they tend to have, we know from other studies, that they have more diverse plant communities. So musk turtles love to have aquatic vegetation, and they have floating or submergent vegetation as well as emergent, and that really attracts them. And it was a sort of a surprise to us that proximity to other wetlands was not really a factor. So these turtles are quite localized in terms of their habitat selection. They can nest very close to the wetlands, so they don't actually have to travel very far and get to other wetlands to nest. And we also determined that generally, if we sample any site 5 times with these spike nets over a 10 to 15 year period, that should be accurate to reflect whether or not musk turtles actually occupied that. And so finally, I'm going to talk to you about current research that we're doing. And this is a completely new field for me, using eDNA to detect the occupancy of turtles. So first of all, what is eDNA and why do we want to use it? Well, environmental DNA is genetic material that's either excreted or secreted, or it's shed, like the skin, into the ambient water. It can be concentrated. So the first thing we have to do is to filter it, to concentrate it. Then we can extract it and then preserve it. And then we can then bring them to a lab and detect it with specific assays. And this could prove to be much more cost effective than conventional field surveys that rely on trained field teams. That's going to be expensive, and because a lot of these are remotely located. The use of eDNA has been field tested in a few sites for blandings in Canada, and the results have been promising, but much more research needs to be done. And so we have taken up this challenge, but we found that even though we are able to maybe overcome some of the problems with the field sampling in the summer, in order to get eDNA that's concentrated enough, we have to sample in winter. And this means that the turtles won't be moving very far, so that's one good thing. But there are some other problems associated with it, such as the difficulty in getting to the turtles in the wintertime. So here is a shot of sight of Blanding's turtle in the summertime, and this is what it looks like in the wintertime. Now that's really great for walking over, but it means that there's a lot more equipment that you have to tow or carry with you to the sites. And the other thing that you need to do is, of course, drill holes in the ice in order to access the water. Now, in the summertime, you can actually see the turtle, so you know where it is and where to sample them. But with them under the ice, you can't actually see them. So it's a little bit of hit and miss. And one of the chief equipment that we use, that we have to rely on, is the Osmos. This is a field filtration device. It is relatively small, but it has to be carried. It is still weighty, and you still have to carry it over long distances. And we have to filter up to 5 liters of the water at one point. And of course, we have to carry an auger to drill the holes. We have to have plenty of tubings and make sure it doesn't freeze. We also have to have a cooler to put all the samples in. And then after the hole is drilled, the tube is then extended into the water. We have to be very careful not to be sucking up any sediment, as that will clog the filters and reduce our filtration efficiencies. And then after that, a long days in the field, we have to still go back in the lab and get these filters that are inside these filtering units, and then avoid cross-contamination, because that's one of the biggest problems with eDNA, and then we can analyze them. And so the question is, did it work? Well, we don't know because just as we were about to do the lab work, we were shut down by COVID-19. So until now, we don't have any results that I can report to you. But we're going ahead with other projects with eDNA, and this is the work of my PhD, my current student, Nick Limas. He works on vernal pools, which are pools that dry up over the summer. And because they do dry up, they are fishless. My undergraduate student, Cameron Brown, is now doing the eDNA work for this. These kind of vernal pool settings are perfect for salamanders. They can lay their eggs there when there is water. The eggs are hatched, the larvae grow, there are no fish to eat them, and then they metamorphose and become land animals when it dries up. Currently, we're sampling in 7 different locations within Eastern Georgian Bay. Many of these locations were places where we had seen Blanding's turtles, and we've also seen spotted turtles use them. So we know that they are important vernal pool habitats as travel corridors. We have selected 31 sites, and we have sampled them over 2 summers to study their characteristics and understand what kind of invertebrates are there and so on. And then this summer, in fact, this week and next week, we're going to be doing more work to collect samples of water, extract the eDNA in there, and then hope to match those results with our field surveys. So I've told you a little bit about the city turtle, a lot more about the country turtle. We now know that road mortality is one of the major reasons for extirpation, local extirpations of turtles. We know also that habitat loss and fragmentation is another big reason for their decline. And this is especially true if we want to protect the turtle populations in Eastern Georgian Bay. Turtles have been around for 220 million years, and they have survived extinction period that killed the dinosaurs. People, though, will cause extinction of these turtles, but they can also help prevent this. So it's really all up to us to do our part. I want to, at this time, acknowledge the financial assistance of a number of agencies listed here. But I also want to especially thank all the volunteers of the Georgian Bay Association, the Georgian Bay Land Trust, the Parks Canada, OMNRF, and as well as the volunteer hosts that have offered us accommodations and helped us out in the field. We couldn't have done this without their support and dedication to conservation of wilderness. So I think at this time, if we have time, I would like to take any questions that you have.
Thanks so much, Pat. Before we do questions, I'm just going to pass it over to Janet here, who has a few closing remarks, and then we'll go in, just in case anyone has to leave us, and then we will go into the question period.
Okay, do you want me to stop sharing?
You can keep it on share, that's fine, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Pat. And great news is that Pat has generously agreed to do a second presentation for kids on Saturday, August 15th at 10 a.m. So she's asking if you would please have your kids send in questions to her using our Conservation Quest email, which is conservationquest@gblt.org by August 7th. And then she'll make sure that she answers them in the presentation. You know, this summer is a bit different for all of us for sure, but we want to let you know that the Georgian Bay Land Trust continues its great conservation work in the Bay. All of our green properties are open, so we remind you that all visitors must abide by the current health guidelines of social distancing and crowd size. If you have any questions, just check our website. We are really so grateful to see many of our loyal supporters here this morning. This is an extraordinary time, and the demand on your resources is very unique this year. So we do hope that you will continue to help us out this year. And for those new to the GBLT, thank you so much for being with us this morning, and we hope that you will put us on your consideration list for your charitable giving in the fall. Our next landmark event is Saturday, July 18th at 10 a.m. when our speaker, Dan Kraus, will speak to us on the relationship between climate change and the Earth's ecosystems and how protecting nature can address the world's biggest threat and protect our own lives. So please make sure you sign up online and so we can send you the link. Thanks everyone. Enjoy this glorious day on the bay and stay safe. Back to you, Pat, for questions.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much. So I will just read some of the questions that we've got here to Pat. So to start off, we've got two related questions from Leslie and Deb. One is in general, what can be done about road mortality? And then more specifically, do turtle fencings along the highways help?
Right. Okay. So I didn't really have time to show the research that we had done. In fact, yes, fencing is the eco fencing or any kind of short fencing that would prevent the turtles from getting into the road. But it's most important that both sides of the road be fenced off, because what will happen is that if it's only fenced on one side, then that means that a turtle that can actually come up on the unfenced side and then hit the fence and not be able to get across, and then have to double back. And then they face double the probability of being hit by a car. So it's really important that the fencing be used. The fencing the integrity of the fencing is really important. So we've actually published papers on this. We did a very large study down in Long Point in Lake Erie. Also within Coots Paradise, there is fencing, but it's not complete. And there are parts that are partial and there are parts that are complete. And so turtles will just find the end of that complete and then start going over there. So what you need to do is completely fence the highway section and make sure that it has high integrity.
Okay, thanks. Another question, can turtles breathe underwater?
Can they breathe underwater? No, they basically hold their breath for the time that they're under the water, because they have the lungs just like land animals.
All right, and another turtle biology question, can turtles lay more than one clutch per season?
They probably could, but not in the northern not in the northern end of their range within Canada. I don't think that is the case for the turtles that we have studied.
Okay. Bill is wondering if with your eDNA sampling, you can differentiate multiple individuals from a sample.
It is possible. It's not probable at this point. All we can do at this point is actually develop a primer that is for the species. I think we're probably decades away from ever looking at just individuals. But what you can do, and what we're planning to do right now, is to look at the detection rate. So we're trying to look at relating the response, the detection of the eDNA with densities of in control. So we're putting in 5 versus 10 versus 20 salamanders in a particular bucket, and then see if there is an actual response in terms of the amount of eDNA that is detected. So we could maybe at some point determine that there's a density response.
Okay. Jeff is wondering if you can say a little more about turtles in marshes and ponds. Are those the same kind of turtles you're talking about on islands, or are there different types? he mentioned he had one nesting in his pond.
Oh, yes. Okay, so landing turtles can live on islands. They can live on the mainland. They'll live in southern Ontario. They live in Nova Scotia. So there is a fairly large number of different habitats that they can occupy. So yes, definitely, you will see landing turtles less in those islands.
Okay. Barb is wondering, are there any organizations advocating for high quality fencing along the most used turtle crossing sections of roads, rather than what the government's using right now? Who are the main players in that?
I believe the turtle conservation, I don't know exactly the title of it, but there is a group, there is a agency within Muskokas that have been looking at mortalities. I don't really know if they've been involved with raising funds or actually actively putting in the fencing. I think this is something. I think there is a vacancy here for agencies and groups to take up this challenge. Wherever you see high turtle mortality, you definitely should be able to raise funds to put those fencing in. I don't think it's a good idea to wait till government gets involved to do that.
Hi, Sarah and Pat, it's Bill here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Part of the community nominated priority place grant with the federal government between the Georgian Bay Reserve and our land trust and 2 First Nations is exactly that. And we're working with government road crews or groups and putting in fencing. So where there's road work going on, we're monitoring that and putting in fencing when that work is done. So that's part of that interface is happening.
Okay, great. We've got a question here from Kathy. Where should casual turtle sightings be reported by the public?
I think there is a Turtle Watch website, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry, I don't know, but there is. Again, I'm not sure that these are actually organized by government, but perhaps the Ontario Nature still has some. Does anybody know?
No, they've closed their
Okay.
Atlas project, but we've normally been recommending that people report to the Herps of Ontario project on iNaturalist,
Okay.
which I think is where
Right, the iNaturalist.
is steering people now. So yeah, if you join iNaturalist and then join the Herps of Ontario project, I think that's a good place for people to be reporting.
Right. So if you take a photo and then also have your GPS coordinates, that would be great.
The other thing to note, if you see a injured turtle on the road, is to call the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre. And I can put that number in the chat, and they will help you with if you find a turtle that needs help now.
Right.
Okay, another turtle biology question. How do turtles get oxygen underwater during the winter?
Well, they are in a very, very reduced rate of metabolism. So they are basically not metabolizing. So they're reducing their need for oxygen. But I don't know enough about the physiology of it to give you probably a sufficient answer for that. I would probably have to find out, but it is something that they really reduce their metabolism and they're very, very low. So they make it last basically.
Okay, great. Noel was wondering if you could talk about, you had a picture in the background of a bunch of turtles basking on a rock. I think they were map turtles.
Yes.
If you could confirm that's what they were and where that was and if that's a common practice.
That was probably on a rock in Georgian Bay. There's the photos in my photo collection. Yes, they do. The map turtles love sunning on rocks. And in fact, there are painted turtles will also do that. I don't actually know where it is. I have 10,000 photos. I would have to go through quite a lot to find out exactly where that is. But yes, that is map turtles.
Okay. Okay, there's a question about the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre, their microchipping turtle releases. Do you scan the turtles you collect or follow?
They are doing that mostly on land, in the inland sites, I'm pretty sure. We are doing all of our surveys in the coastal marshes. So any turtles that we encounter are unlikely to have those microchips. But you know, they are probably at least 20 or 30 kilometers inland where that is being done.
Okay. And then a question, have you noticed any change in road mortality with the increased public awareness about moving turtles off the road and turtle crossing signs?
Okay, that's a fairly general question. I have to say that within Hamilton, there are lots of turtle crossing signs. There are big signs that come up. Unfortunately, we still get mortality, but now because the population has been reduced to such low numbers, we don't see that many turtles dying. So it's really tough to say that it has helped or not. But I do know that I have heard people, and this I've never seen it, but I've heard people say that there are still people that persecute the turtles and will deliberately run over them. So I think this is, while there is a lot of people now that will abide and are sympathetic and want to help out the turtles, there are still a lot of people that don't do that and don't really think that it's worthwhile or why we are really, for instance, we in Coots Drive, which is actually a highway, it's one of the shortest highways. It's the speed limit was 80 kilometers, and we changed it, or it has been changed to 50 kilometers. But even that is too fast for turtles when they're crossing. So some people will find that unacceptable, that we're reducing speed just for some turtles. This is in their mind, just for some turtles.
All right. I think I've gone through all the questions. Apologies if I've missed yours. We can have some follow-up afterwards as well. But thanks so much, Pat. This has been really great. This has been recorded, so for anyone who missed part of it, we'll be sending out the recording afterwards. And thank you so much. It's been great to have everyone join us today.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.